Well, let's get into our final segment of today and our special feature. So, our
Been waiting for
replay,
this one. Been waiting for this one.
Donkey Kong Country. I think we flagged it in our first podcast
I think we
that,
did.
hey, this game's coming out. This is going to be part of the Nintendo Switch Online, so the Super Nintendo virtual console, essentially. It's coming in as part of one of the games that you can play there. It's one of the big games that I guess most people sort of thought was weird that wasn't available initially when it came out. So we decided we'd play it. We haven't checked in. This is the first time we've discussed this.
Exactly.
I'm assuming that you've beaten the game.
Yeah, of course, of course. I,
Of course.
I, I'm not going to start Donkey Kong Country for the purpose of talking about it and not complete it because it's as much as it took us a month to actually start talking about it. It's not the longest game. It's a pretty short game if you don't struggle too much. So
I think you were like implying pressure on me by saying, hey, it's not that long of a game. Like offline when we were just chatting about it. You're like, hey, it's not that long of a game. Like we should play it. E.g., you should finish it. So do you want to ask me whether I've beaten it or not?
I know you've beaten it.
Oh, have I told you?
No. You said you were getting close to the end, but I know you would have beaten it.
No,
It
I
would
haven't
have
beaten
eaten
it.
you up inside if you didn't beat it. I reckon.
Oh,
You
100%.
would have been like, God damn it, I didn't
But
beat
the
it.
question is, how did you play it? Like, so okay, first off, I should say I played it on the Switch. So, given that we said, hey, it's coming out on the Switch, I thought, well, I'll play it there. That's where it's coming out rather than play it on my Super NT. Where did you play it and how did you play it?
I played it on the Switch as well. So
Okay.
I used the Pro controller.
Okay. And then, like, when I say also, how did you play it? E.g., the Nintendo Switch has the inbuilt functionality, so you can save states, load states,
Oh yeah.
rewind.
Yeah.
This is very controversial because some people get really riled up. Like, hey, you can't say you've beaten this game. You've used save states or you've used a rewind feature. That's not beating the game.
Hmm.
By the way, I don't care about that kind of stuff, but I know
Yeah.
people get real wound up about it. So yeah, how did you play it?
Oh, I just played it normally. So the only reason I used save states was just to make it easy to come back to the game and make sure I didn't lose progress. So
Oh,
it's
okay. So
the
if you
game. The
die,
game
you
gives you the game gives you so many lives, and you can easily farm the lives as well if you struggle. So
mm. So I abused the hell out of the rewind feature.
oh what?
I did not lose a life.
Oh my god! You did that just to say that, didn't you?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. Dude, the thing is that I
So
realized,
does that mean
especially, and
did you beat K Rule on the first try because you used rewind?
no, rewind. Yeah, I rewind it.
Oh sheesh. Now,
Actually, I
see,
didn't
I'm going to be
struggle.
one of those people right now and say, for the purpose of this, that's bullshit. That is bullshit.
Look, the thing is, like, okay, I'll say a couple of things. First off, I used to be a little bit like that and not precious about it. I'd just be like, hey, you probably don't say that you've beaten the game. And even when I said I've beaten the game, I was kind of being a bit jokey. Like, I completed the game, I rolled the credits, whatever you want to kind of say about the game. I got through the whole game one way or another. But I think the thing is, especially when you become a parent and you don't have as much time, and I've got a full-time job and there's a lot
It's
going
a
on. And I've
short
got
game. What are you talking about?
yeah, but dude, I don't
Like,
have much time. Like,
no,
I,
I know,
I, I
but that is not justification for a rewind that much. Like, okay, the rewind thing, right? Whatever, cool. But to do it to the point where you don't even lose a single life is ridiculous. That is
oh, dude,
overkill, man. That's
dude,
like me and Battletoads. Like, Battletoads is a hard ass game. I wouldn't have been able to get anywhere in that game. Donkey Kong Country is not a hard ass game. It's tricky. See, I reckon that is bullshit.
look, do I think that I could get through the game? I've beaten the game before when I was a kid, right? Like, 100%, I think I can beat the
I know you
game.
could get through the game. It's a pretty easy game.
Well, I don't know, easy. Was it easy? I'd say it's like easy to medium. But
That's only because you weren't learning because you were rewinding all the time, so you weren't getting better.
oh, look, and this is kind of cutting into talking about the game. I think the game, and this is a big problem in old school games. I think the game can be a bit cheap. Like there's enemy placements. It's kind of weird playing it again. You're so zoomed in, essentially. You know, you can't see much of the frame of what's coming at you. And that's why you need a rewind feature. That, you know, you die
But
sometimes just because you don't know the level. But once you know the level, it's like, oh, this is really easy. So
but
yeah, probably
I
easy on
agree it can
replay.
be I agree it can be cheap. Like it's cheap as hell, and it will randomly throw an enemy at you that's flying in when it's kind of you're expecting to jump, right?
Yeah,
But the whole point of this is about learning the layouts. You know,
yeah,
it's like
fair
Mega
enough.
Man, like any of this stuff. So
Yeah,
I have no
and it's
problem
not a cheap
against
game.
using.
Like, I just want to make it clear. I don't think it's a cheap game. I think it can be cheap at times. I just want to
Oh,
really make that clear.
hell, it can be cheap. Like
Yeah.
I've got some like my thoughts on the good and man, there's some bad there, but yeah, I guess to I'd like to talk about the good before we get to the bad, even though
Yeah,
you've
sure,
already
sure,
started
sure.
talking about
So
that.
you've already lambasted me for the way that I played the game.
I think to that extent, like I think that's a bit ridiculous. But I understand. I look, I know what you're saying, but to do it without losing a life is ridiculous. Anyway,
Well,
so
you can't
all
say
right.
that you played it and didn't lose a life. Go on,
Well,
go on.
I lost. I don't know. I lost like probably like 30 something lives at the end of it.
Oh, that's
But
pretty good. I would have lost way more than that.
yeah.
But yeah, go on.
Um. So to me, Donkey Kong Country. The way I think about this, to me, this game is such a phenomenon when I was a kid.
Mm.
And I know it didn't, but to me as a kid, it felt like it came out of nowhere. And I don't know why. Like I used to buy Total magazine in the UK. You know, I used to love reading all the games magazines, and
Mm.
I don't know why, but this game it came out very late into the the SNES lifetime, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. And I'm like, oh my god, I've never seen a game that looks like this. It was incredible, and also Donkey Kong hadn't been a thing other than Donkey Kong 94 or whatever it's called on Game Boy. Donkey Kong hadn't been a thing for so many years, and this game just floored everyone. And I even remember, I don't know if this came out in anywhere other than UK, but when I got the game, I got it actually I think on release, which is crazy back then. I never got games on release, and it even had a music CD called Go Ape. And did you have you ever heard of this music CD?
No, I don't think that came out in Australia.
Right. Well, I definitely didn't think because all the artists are basically UK artists, but no joke, it had
Mm.
Radiohead on it. It had
What?
Primal Scream. It had Oasis on it. It was like
That
eight
sounds
bands
sick.
on it. It's crazy. It was Creep, Radiohead Creep, and
Oh,
man,
okay, cool.
I love this city because I actually got into a lot of the bands from listening to it, and it's
That's
just
awesome.
weird because it's the most un Donkey Kong thing ever. You know, this like to have Radiohead on the CD. But to talk about go back to the game, right? To me, replaying it has really cemented the fact that to me this is one of the best pure platformers on the SNES. Because
Oh,
when I say
really? Whoa.
pure platformers in that you're just running and jumping for 90% of it. You know, every now and then you'll run on you'll get on an animal friend or you'll enter a bonus area
Hmm.
or and obviously when I say running jumping, that includes okay, you're in Minecraft jumping, minecart jumping, or you're
Yeah.
shooting at a barrel, or whatever. But there's very little bullshit outside of it, really, and it's that's both good and bad. Like the DKC 2 and 3 started adding a whole lot more to it, but this game just felt like this is just a pure platformer, and I really
Hmm.
like that. And it's I think it still looks great, even without the benefit of like CRT blurriness to like blur the jagginess of
Yeah.
the sprites and that. I think it still looks fantastic. Um, and the thing as well, there's some crappy levels in this game. There really are some crappy levels, but if you don't like them, they're short enough that they don't outstay their welcome. Like you can get through them pretty quickly. You're like, okay, this annoying level, I've got that behind me, but then there's a whole bunch of cool levels coming up. So I
Yeah.
just and they're just full of secrets. There's just like some real mischievous stuff in this game, and they ran with that in the future ones, like just making things so hidden. It's so awesome.
Yeah, and I just want to ground the context of this game as well for everyone who maybe isn't as familiar. So this game came out in '94, but the era that we were in at that time, as we lived it, given how old we are, everything was 2D at that time. So games like Street Fighter 2 and then all the sort of spin-offs from that, Turbo and everything like that, Super Mario World, Zelda 3, all of these kind of games were like the apex of gaming, and like how awesome does this look, this 2D game? And then in the background, Sony came along and you had stuff like the PlayStation and all of those graphics, which, probably looking at it today, I feel like Donkey Kong Country looks better than PlayStation games, like from a 2020 lens. But at the time, everyone was like, wow, PlayStation looks amazing, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
But,
it's
you had this game where Nintendo was like seeing all this stuff happening, and, this company, Rare, in the UK, had done all this work around, using computer graphics and then, basically taking a screenshot of the computer graphics into a 2D model. And then they were able to, create a game out of it that looked like insane. It looked like it was a 3D game sort of for back then. Obviously, you don't look at it as a 3D game now, but back then it really kind of did look like it. And it sort of was like a weird next gen game on a current gen console is how I felt at the time. And especially, I wasn't going to be able to afford a PlayStation. I was like looking at it going, oh, this is unreal. This is like, we've got a next gen game on an awesome console, which was the Super Nintendo. So it was a huge game for Nintendo from my perspective, and I think they've even kind of commented post fact that this was a really important title for getting through that generation and then onto the 64.
also it was, I believe, the third best-selling game on the console, and all three of the Donkey Kong Country games, I believe, in the top 10 selling games. So
Yeah, that's
that's
right. Yeah.
yeah, it obviously it moved a lot of units, and you just had to look at this in the store because, as we're saying at the time, nothing looked like this game.
Yeah, it was
It was
crazy,
incredible.
right? And
Yeah,
like going to your point around how it looks, like so I played it. This game still holds up, man. Like, and I probably do veer a little bit retro with things, and I just think the 2D aesthetic just holds up way better than early 3D does. And we were just chatting about PlayStation. I still think that these games look better than the early, 64 and PlayStation games, and they've got their own kind of vibe to them for me. But this game looks unreal, and I know that there's been homebrew and community efforts, but a little dream of mine would be that they actually release like a trilogy of these games, with they're taking the original models and sort of just put more detail into them and just release it as like a standalone cart, because I just think that would be unreal. Like just to have super high def version of this, but I wouldn't change that much about it at all, to be honest.
yeah. I think weirdly you might lose a bit of character from it though,
Yeah, maybe.
because I've seen that a lot with when they've created HD versions. Like we saw it with Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo when they
That's true.
redid all the sprites, and there were more problems to that game, I believe, from like frame data and like hitboxes and stuff. That it wasn't to do with that, but it looked great, but it just didn't feel right. Something it felt almost like manufactured, like a fake version. So I wonder if how that would work. But I guess from a presentation standpoint, this game is also, and continuing on to the other Donkey Kong Country games, also stand out in terms of music. These, this game has such incredible music that it's almost crazy. Like I think no other Super Nintendo game sounds like this, and I don't know how they did it, other than obviously the sequels.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with where you're coming from around the music. I think the graphics are sort of always the obvious thing for people when they think about Donkey Kong Country, but I think the music of the trilogy, and there's certain tracks in there that I actually would literally put up there as just great pieces of music. Probably from my perspective, are actually the height of the series and what the series actually has to offer. Like, if you had a look at it, would you say, if you had to rank the music versus the graphics or other parts of the game, what would you rank higher?
I almost like the music the most out of
Mm.
everything in the game, and the standout to me is and will always be, and it's my second favorite in the series, is Aquatic Ambience.
Yes,
The
yes, yes.
it's that song just with the way it kind of like has, it's almost like delay effects in it, but obviously
Yeah.
it's like it's actually built into it. It's so amazing, that track, that other than Sticker Brush Symphony from number two, which is kind of like the classic Donkey Kong Country song, those two songs together are just absolute bliss. And I think it's no, you know, it's just shown wherever, if you look up chill SNES soundtrack, in YouTube, and people put these compilations together, and usually it's always got like Waterworld in it, it's always got Sim City in it, things like that. It's always got Aquatic Ambience every time. That's like the key song you have to have in like a chills soundtrack for SNES games. But I also like there's a song called Life in the Mines, which I think if you wouldn't probably know that one, by name, but
Mm.
that is really really good as well. And the main theme, just the one that's playing on the title screen, is just so cool, and just sets the scene. I remember as a kid when it does the intro with Cranky, turning the record player, and it's like the 8-bit version main theme. Then it like brings in the drums and everything. It sounds so great, and I think that's just it sets us up for an awesome soundtrack.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, I look at Donkey Kong Country and just the trilogy in general. It's probably the only part of the trilogy that, like, to me is just perfect. And, like, sure, like, not every track is the greatest track, but something like Aquatic Ambience, I reckon, and I love to be a bit controversial, but, I think you could mount a really reasonable argument to go that that's the best video game song ever. Like it's such a good song. It's a killer. And also how they got that to get produced on the Super Nintendo hardware and all the hoops that they had to go through to get it done with the harmonics and everything. It was crazy. Like they basically had to rig their own programming language to make it happen. There's some really cool YouTube videos on it. Yeah, the music is just perfect. Like it was actually the thing when I was playing the game. I actually then had to go put headphones on so I could hear it more clearly. And then also I was just like, man, this music is just, it's not like an aged thing. It's just so good, so perfect, and just like unreal actually. Like, and you kind of knew it at the time. I remember listening to these songs and, I know that we're talking about Donkey Kong Country, but Donkey Kong Country 2, it's, like the music in that, even the title song in that, it just sets the tone so perfectly of that game
Mm.
and how it's kind of got that darker, grimmer kind of, feel to the whole game. Yeah, it's just unreal. Like they've done such a good job on the soundtrack. It was mostly David Wise from memory, right?
Yeah, I believe there were other musicians, or at least I don't know if you. It's weird. Like obviously, people that work in video game music are musicians, but also at that point they're probably also programmers. It's like you would have had to have been probably jack of all trades in that era
Mm.
to make the most of it. But yeah, I believe there's also Evelyn Fisher and someone else that I haven't got the name of in that I saw in the credits themselves of the game. But yeah, it's just so good, and it's kind of crazy because if you think about the challenge that they had ahead of them, okay, make a new Donkey Kong game.
Mm.
What do you have to work off in terms of soundtrack? You've only got the the original couple of three Donkey Kong games plus the Game and Watch plus whatever cameos that he appeared in and things like Donkey Kong 94. You didn't have a lot of music to work off, and they essentially just created an entire sound for Donkey Kong that's persisted to this day.
Yeah, and
Every future Donkey Kong game has kind of followed along these kind of lines, and they created it.
yeah,
It's
for sure.
fantastic.
And really when you think about it, like in almost everyone apart from anyone maybe above 40 or even 45, like they have set what Donkey Kong is. And, the whole, we haven't even got into the fact of the Donkey Kong in the arcade game, like what is it, 1982 arcade game, is not the Donkey Kong that you're playing, the main protagonist in the game proper. And, that's also handled in a very fun way, in a very, tongue-in-cheek and also kind of a bit of a nod to the whole game, I think, way, which I really like.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember when Super Mario Kart came out, they had Donkey Kong in that, and I'm like, man, Donkey Kong. Oh, I forgot all about Donkey Kong, and everything. And then, like, he looked so different in that. And now they've just gone and created also this look for Donkey Kong that is now the default look of the bit of kind of hair that's like I wouldn't say curled, but spiked at the top, and obviously the tie. All that stuff came from this game. The look that everyone knows Donkey Kong now came from this game.
Well, I mean, even the one in Super Mario Kart on the SNES was Donkey Kong Jr.,
Oh, well,
which
there
is
you
even
go.
kind of like weirder in a way, because it was...
I'll take that back then.
And no, but like from what you're saying, I think the funny thing about it to me is, like, I kind of didn't really have any relationship with Donkey Kong. And, kind of tying this in with an episode that we did a few weeks ago with some of the leaks that came out, the Giga Leak and everything like that, how Super Mario World was meant to almost be, there's some thoughts around maybe it was going to be Super Donkey World or something along those lines and actually feature Donkey Kong. So, it's kind of like, to me, a really interesting thing how I almost think because of the success of this game, it really just separated those two franchises. And now, if Donkey Kong appeared in, say, Super Mario Odyssey 2, I'd almost feel like that's odd. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. Donkey Kong has its own series, but it's great that they're connected in some way.
Well, very, very closely, right? Because, Jumpman and Donkey Kong, they both appeared in the first game together, right? Like, I got that right? Yeah.
In saying that, I mean, Donkey Kong was in Odyssey, so
Wait,
just
was
in
it?
a different format. Yeah, remember in the celebration in New Dog City?
Oh, yeah,
When you're in
yeah,
the
true.
2D version. So it's when I say that, it's more like homage, not Donkey Kong the 3D character. But it was cool that's actually, I would say, the most that they've actually kind of connected in a mainline Mario game. Because if you think about all previous mainline Mario games, Donkey Kong's never even been mentioned or the connection really.
That's
So
true,
the fact that
actually.
they had a whole celebration with Pauline in New Donk City, and it's like this is the city that Donkey Kong was set in. That's really cool. So
I, I know we're going on a mega tangent now, but like I do hope one time we do 2017 as a big wig game of some other year, because that game, we had arguments about it at the time about whether it's better than Breath of the Wild, and I know we haven't really gotten into your thoughts around that game yet, and we'll hold that off for a
that is
while.
like the most talked about hinted at thing in this whole
It's
podcast.
just
Sheesh.
it's the I like so I respect your opinion. We've known each other for a very long time, and I respect your opinion almost more than anyone else. But that your opinion you have of that game puts everything into question. That's the teaser that I have for people. But yeah, I just want to quickly say that experience of Super Mario Odyssey, and like spoiler alert for Super Mario Odyssey for those who haven't played it. So that one with Donkey Kong, and then the part at the end of the game where they go back into like Mario 64. Like honestly, like and this sounds embarrassing, but I almost like got emotional, man. I was like, they executed it so perfectly, and it wasn't like cheap, and the nostalgia wasn't like, unwarranted. That I
Yeah.
was just like so into it, man. I was like, wow, this is so beautiful. Like it's just beautiful the way they did it. But yeah, going back to this game, like we haven't gone through all the components yet, but the one thing I have to say is, as I was playing this game, to me, and I think we do actually have different views of this game, and probably partly shaped by how we played it, because you got this game when it came out. I didn't get this game. I did play it, but I got Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Kong Quest. And for me, like almost, I think I pretty much played this game second after Diddy's Conquest. it just does feel like the, like almost final draft version before you've perfected it. Does
Oh
that make
yeah,
sense?
100%. And it's one thing that's actually one of the reasons why I'm going to actually replay number 2 and 3 again, and then go on to Returns and Tropical Freeze. And I was hoping we could make a feature out of it. So knowing that these games are a bit shorter than some of the games for some other year that we're looking at, that it might be possible that in a couple of months or in a couple, I wouldn't say a couple of weeks, but let's say in a couple of months we hit number 2 and then number 3 and that would be really cool, because I'd like to see that progression. I'd like to re-experience that progression. But I do think going from DKC2 to this one, definitely. And that, I guess, leads into my thoughts about what's not so good about the game. So for me, the bad is that the game's kind of bare bones. And the thing with that, it's to be expected in this era, right? A lot of games, especially non-Nintendo games, where you hit start, it's a platformer, you play through 10 levels, and that's it. You don't get any extras, right? So I'm not saying it is to be expected. But the problem is it's hard to judge this game in isolation when you've experienced the number 2 and number 3. And, up front, I've said it before, like, I know number 2 is your favorite and is the favorite of probably the majority of people. Number 3 is actually my favorite. And and I love number 2, don't get me wrong. But
I know you love
games,
it. Yeah.
those two games have so much more to them that it does unfortunately kind of it casts a bit of a negative light on Donkey Kong Country 1. And that's why I talked about that. To me, it's even of the 3, it's the best pure platformer still, because there's just less. It's more focused purely on that. There's not, you don't have to really worry about anything else, except the bonus barrels if you want to get the 100%. But it is kind of bad. I think once you've got those bonus barrels, there really isn't that much to do. I think even the future games added. I'm not sure. Wasn't there like a time trial mode you can unlock after you beat number 2 properly, or something like that?
I do recall that. Yeah, I do recall that. Yeah.
Or there was something anyway. It just felt like there was more to experience, and obviously a lot of that was also the secrets. So I don't know if that's kind of lines up with you about, hey, it's almost like a fully fleshed prototype of the series.
Yeah, I mean, like, partly. And, I'm much more forgiving, I think, than you. Just because the games of that era, they just weren't built like that. And a lot of it was just limitations, small team sizes, all that kind of stuff. So, like these days, they probably have 10 people, 12 people working on menu systems and UI and, how do you go in between the UI in a game? Whereas back then, they had 12 people working on Donkey Kong Country, right? Like, it's just different, totally era. So I'm more forgiving of that part. It's more, the game to me has a lot of rough edges and, like things where, the game really does feel cheap at times, certain enemy placements. I know it's about learning the levels, but at the same time, I never felt like that with Donkey Kong Country 2. Like, I feel like that game, they're challenges for you rather than just feeling a little bit rushed, or like not rushed, but it's just inexperienced about how to make something to the level that they do with Donkey Kong Country 2, where I really look at Donkey Kong Country 2 and consider that to the same level as a Super Mario World. Like, I think it's that level of quality, whereas this game feels a little bit offbeat at times. There's certainly like levels, and we haven't gone into the specific levels, but things like the minecart levels, although yes, they do have a few quirks and weird hitboxes and stuff like that, I think that they're awesome. And I think, like, even today I find them really fun. And there's lots of levels in this game where it's like, oh wow, this is awesome, but then there's also parts of the game that I'm a bit like, oh, I'm just really looking forward to getting through it, and I didn't really kind of even enjoy the way it was structured or the way it was. And again, I'd have to play Donkey Kong Country 2 again, and to your point around like, should we go through the games? I think that's a great idea, because it did actually, after playing this game, go, oh man, I'm going to fire up Diddy's Conquest after this to kind of almost compare as well and just see how it evolves. But I'm pretty certain that there's a lot less of just kind of like levels where it's just kind of a bit annoyed or just one kind of cheap trick after the other. And it wasn't all the way through the game. It was just kind of like, I wish that they edited the game or like took certain bits out, but then the game's already pretty short and it'd be even shorter. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's why I kind of made the mention that there are some horrible levels, but thankfully they're short enough to get through. But any time that they threw, I think it was one of the ice levels. I can't remember the name.
Yes.
The snow level, I should say, not ice level. Sorry, it's one of the snow levels where they had the orangutans throwing the barrels.
Yes, dude, that's so funny. That's exactly the level I was thinking about.
And you had the section where it's going up a hill, and then there was also like gaps to fall down. And I'm like, this is a bit of a ridiculous setup. Now, it's obviously possible. Like, I got past it. Yeah, everyone can get past it. But it's like, it's just designed to kill you the first time you go there. And it's not fun, that kind of section. And I think that they really learned a lot from this game. When you think about what Rare or, Ultimate played the game or whatever they were called before Rare, they had never put together a game like this before, so they would have learned a lot from the process. And you do see that, I think, those improvements in number 2. Number 2 and number 3 still had a lot of sections where if you didn't know that what was going to happen, you were going to die. But it was, I think, handled in a very different way. Like number 2 to me is a way harder game than this game, but it's harder in a different sense.
But it kind of feels fairer, if that makes sense. And less frustrating, for me at least.
Well, it's more about the execution other than... Like, you're still learning, obviously, but it's more about, I screwed up because I didn't do that properly. As opposed to, I died because the game threw something at me that no one would have ever expected.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like the game's a little bit cheaper. And, like, the other part of it is, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but my memory isn't that like Donkey Kong Country 3 and 2 have as many kind of weird input bugs or like, kind of hitbox issues.
Okay, I'm glad you said hitbox because that's the next thing on my list. The hitboxes in this game can be so terrible at times.
Yeah.
But this is the thing that I think my eyes opened up to most playing it in current day versus back then. Like, of course, I would have remembered, these claptraps. The claptraps are the worst, by the way, because you will jump on them and sometimes they'll just hit you and you just will have no idea. Or you will jump on a claptrap.
No.
It will hurt you and its sprite is turned around the opposite way where it was running. And you're like, what the hell happened there? Now, obviously, there's probably some way where it makes sense in the programming code, but to the player, it doesn't make sense a lot of the times. And I think the hitboxes, I feel that they really improved upon that in the future games from that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping we don't get to those games and we're like, oh man, the hitboxes are still really dodgy.
Look, the way I remember it is Donkey Kong Country, not Tropical Freeze or Returns. I think they're pretty good. And I can't kind of wait to get to those games because having played those games recently, I'm almost like, oh, are they better games? But, we'll save that discussion. But my recollection of it, and I'm willing to go out on a limb on this, is that the whole trilogy has issues. But I remember even back in the day, back then, number 1 certainly has more issues. And number 2 and 3 of their era, it's probably almost on par with a lot of games back then. They just weren't as finely tuned as they are now. Whereas number 1, there was, same as you. Like, there's times where I'm hitting enemies. I'm like, why did I die? Like, what? And it's like, I think I'm hitting them a little bit too far forward, even though the animation looks like it should be fine. And it just gives you that sense of being really inconsistent and just not fair, which I hate in games when things don't feel fair. But yeah, like it's a real funny one. And it's probably, to me, actually the thing that annoyed me most about the game, more than anything, more than the length or, the clunky systems or And actually, hey, we haven't even talked about this. The boss fights,
That's literally the
the
next thing on my
the
list.
Dark Soul level boss fights.
That is. It's like you're reading my list, the exact order of what's on there. So I basically have written down bosses are terrible other than K. Rool. And not only are they terrible, but they recycle two of them, and they're all too easy until K. Rool.
It's like they're not. They're just shocking. Like bizarre. Like they're either just sine waves coming at you, or things coming right down. And I don't think I died on any of the bosses up to K. Rool.
No, they're all ridiculously easy. I'd say the second whatever, I don't know, bird that shoots the things, that that is a little trickier than the others, but
Mm.
it's the thing with these is that also with that bird, the RNG, I got stuck in a cycle where it was appearing at the top of the screen on both sides. It appeared like 6 times in a row, both sides. And I'm like,
Oh
come
yeah.
on. Just the RNG on this is horrible. Now, obviously, it's not everyone's going to have that experience, but I remember watching speed runs and at AGDQ of this game, and everyone's like, "Oh no, let's hope we get good RNG for this boss fight."
Oh, so
Um,
that is RNG because I've
yeah,
always got a god complex and I always think I can control these things. So I was like trying to jump up and do a few things to try to control it. So I didn't realize it's more just an RNG thing.
no, I believe I remember when I was watching one of those runs, they talked about just like the boss. Some of the bosses in that game just run killers because you can get a bad cycle. But
Oh wow.
it's but the thing is, right, with the K. Rool fight, I love the K. Rool fight. I think it's great. It's a little annoying because I actually died quite a bit on the last cycle
Phase.
that he does, and so I
Mm.
had to go through the part where the cannibals drop down so many times, and that's so easy that I was just like, oh god, just get the cannibals over with. Come on. But other than that, I love that fight, and that fight set the scene for the future games, which have great boss fights.
Yeah. And
So
again, that's where I'm coming from. That I just, so I want to address the K. Roll fight before shitting on the game again, which is very unfair. Um, I didn't think the K. Rool fight was that good. I feel like it's only good from a context that the other boss fights were just so bad that actually having a boss that does something different is like, oh wow, this is amazing. Like you're actually doing stuff. Again, like back then, the games used to have really tough boss fights, but like the K. Rool one, there's just times where you have to be positioned in a certain way, or else you almost just can't react to what K. Rool's about to do. Do you know what I mean?
oh yeah, the K. Rool fight is something you have to. You're gonna die on him until you know that. Well, you're not gonna die on him because he's just gonna press rewind. But
Correct.
um, yeah, the specifically the last he basically goes through like three different rounds, and they've got the cool mechanic where you beat him and then he goes to the credits and then comes back. That's cool. I'm so glad that you didn't have to go to the credits each time you replayed.
Oh, by the
That's
way, I thought the game was over, and I thought, oh, this is kind of weird credits. I don't remember this, and maybe they're gonna roll the real credits after this and put
Oh,
the
you
the
actually
switch
got.
down.
Oh, what you? Oh my god, that just goes to show you never had played this game first as a kid. Didn't they do the same thing in number two?
I can't remember, man. I got a bad memory for this kind of stuff.
Okay. Anyway,
I got a real
I
bad memory for this kind of stuff.
I really like the K-Rool boss fight. When you think about it, they're like boss fights in platformers weren't that great back in the day. So I think this actually
Yeah, it's
was
true.
pretty good. But the thing is, the future games, especially, I love the boss fights in number three so much. The the boss fights in the other games just stump all over this though. So,
Mm.
but uh, one thing outside of bosses that I didn't mention was I mentioned claptraps. The fact that they throw jumping claptraps at you, I just remember writing down a note like jumping claptraps can f off. Like, come on. Like, also, just there's certain sections in the game where there's enemies that only Donkey Kong can kill, for instance, by
Yeah,
jumping
oh,
on.
that annoyed me, man.
And they've positioned some levels where it's very difficult if you don't have Donkey Kong to actually get anywhere. Like you have to be so good at the game to be able to actually get past as Diddy Kong. And I'm not a fan of that at all. I think that it's fine to have like bonuses like extra, bonus barrels or bananas and stuff to get. Oh, I can only get those Donkey Kong because that enemy's blocking it. That's fine, but I think you shouldn't have to have a character be able to progress through a level, and I don't think that's the case at all in the sequels. I think you know,
Oh.
no, I think that generally it's always just like, well, if you don't have Dixie, you can't get this bonus. It doesn't stop you from actually easily progressing if you don't have one of the Kongs.
Well,
Um,
that's true, but I still think that that's true in this game. Like, you can get through it. It's just extremely difficult. But I do
when I say
think that,
extremely difficult, there's like ridiculously. There's one section where there's I don't know if they're crushers or the ones with the hard hats, where
yeah, I know.
they're actually blocking the platform if you only can kill them with Donkey Kong. So
That's
yeah,
like the one with fuel or something like that, right?
yeah, that
Yeah, yeah.
was that level, which is platform peril. That's the worst level in the game.
Oh,
Um,
really? So I didn't think it was that bad. It was just because I didn't mind the mechanic. I thought it was at least a bit different.
I'm fine
But
with the
yeah,
fuel
no.
mechanic. I did not like the having to pick up the barrels to kill the enemies each time. Now, the actual main reason issue I had was there was just some of the design decisions in that level led me to having to swap between Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong all the time, which I kind of felt annoying because like if I jumped on one of those enemies with a hard hat, as Diddy Kong, it then bounced me off the platform and I died, and I did that so
Yeah.
many times, and I'm just like, oh, I bloody hate this level. I like the idea of having to refuel that platform. Like, that's one thing we didn't mention about the good. Like, they came up with so many cool gimmicks, and that kind of set the mold for the future sequels of, hey, there's going to be gimmicks that are specific to one level and one level only. Or we might, for instance, instead of jumping with the mine cart, you're going to jump out of the mine carts, or they kind of mix up those gimmicks. So it's really really cool what they did with that. But that platform peril level, yeah, some of the enemy placements in that were horrible.
Yeah, and I think again, it's kind of one of the weakest parts of this game. We just, having a bit of cheapness about it. But yeah, I agree with you. It's very similar to Mario, where they'll introduce a gimmick for a level and then they just never bring it back. And a lot of other games, that gimmick will be the whole game.
Yeah.
Whereas, they just do one thing and it's like, okay, we do it once, or and I feel like it's probably a little bit more repeated in Donkey Kong Country. Like, they'll have minecart levels and then riff on that idea, all those kind of stage levels, and they'll kind of go and riff on that idea again.
But I'm talking about the fact that they've got like a barrel that turns lights on. You never see
Yeah,
that in the other levels. It's just in that one level. So
yeah, and that level seemed like, I don't know. There's something about it. It seemed really odd. It reminded me of Oddworld for some reason,
okay.
stylistically. Don't you?
I
Did you kind of? Do you know where I'm coming from with that? Or
no idea where you're coming from on that. I what I will say
no,
about
those
those
enemies
levels.
just looked really odd, and like, I don't know. It just seemed very like strange to me. I
Well,
don't
I
know.
played this game before I played Oddworld, so that if
Mm.
anything, I'd feel probably the opposite way. But um, I but what I really like is actually how they graphically handled turning the lights on and off. And there's also the level where there's I think it's in a cave where there's minimal light as well. It's really really cool, and even they have the I forget the name, the bees like zingers or stingers or something. You can see the eyes of them in the light. You can't see the rest of them. It's like really cool things like that. But
Mm.
I guess to go back to probably my last thought about what I don't like as much about the game is I think the early levels, probably the first two worlds, some of those levels are a bit boring. I don't think that's just me, but I don't think it was like they're badly designed or anything because a lot of those levels are the ones that people fondly remember in the jungle. But some of them are just so simple and they have like barrels that will boost you halfway through the level anyway. So I think that they pick up the challenge, which is good. So I much prefer the second half of the game than like let's say the first half.
Yeah, for me, if I was to break the game up into three acts, I feel that probably the second act would be the best, because that's kind
Yeah,
of when you're getting up to the minecart levels, because they don't come right at the start. The difficulty increases, because I totally agree. The start of the game's really kind of like boring almost. Like I wasn't using much of my rewind function at all at the start of the game. I was just kind of getting through it. And I'm like, oh my god, like was this game that easy? I don't remember it being this easy.
Yeah, I don't think I lost a life in the first two worlds,
Hmm.
and that made me go, what's going on here? And then they picked it up. They picked it up.
Like when I
So,
played that first boss, I was like, really? Like I
the
kind of
first boss
remembered
is
how bad it was, but Jesus, it's bad. It's
one
so
thing.
bad.
One thing I'll say that bosses is that the sprites were nice. You know, they were nice big sprites, but
That's
they
true.
were horrible bosses.
And like just kind of from an overall perspective from me about this game, and I was trying to find the right movie analogy for some reason, and I think it's because in video games, although there are a lot of trilogy video games kind of bust through that most of the time and get up to like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, countless games in the sort of series. Whereas movies, it just feels a lot more common that you have trilogies. And I always consider these games a trilogy, and then the stuff that came later, like Donkey Kong Country Returns, it's kind of like a continuation, but it's not a direct continuation on from Country in my mind. And there was two things that came to mind, and I think it's a bit of a blend of these two things. So like, bear with me a little bit. I feel like Donkey Kong Country to Donkey Kong Country 2 is a mix between a bit like Evil Dead to Evil Dead 2 and Back to the Future and Back to the Future 2, where the third one in that series is a little bit different. It's still in the series, in the vein of the series, but it's different. Whereas the sequels to me are just better movies than the first, and in some ways kind of a rehash of the same thing, but just executing everything better. And that's kind of ultimately what I think about this game. That it's kind of a weird one. It's a quick game, so it's like definitely a game you can get through. But I just think if you play Donkey Kong Country 2, you're going to get everything from that you need to get from this game from Donkey Kong Country 2, and it's just a better game. Like I don't think you're missing anything. Is kind of ultimately where I'm coming from. And I'd almost think of the same about like Evil Dead and Back to the Future. It's like sure you definitely can go watch those, but the sequels are just to me better. And like you don't need to watch it if you don't need to.
See, it's funny to me because I prefer Evil Dead to Evil Dead 2.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
Evil Dead 2 is like the thing is they're very different. So it's it's not like they're very comparable in a lot of ways because they're just so different in tone.
Oh yeah, sure, but I
Like
mean,
Evil Dead 2 is a lot more slapstick than Evil
yeah,
Dead 1.
definitely,
But
100%.
we going back to I guess like comparing it to Donkey Kong, I kind of agree. I do think there are a few standout levels and of some of the music that you would miss out on by not playing number one. But I think if you're going to play any game in the series, then number two is a good choice. And obviously, number three to me is has the best levels by far, in my opinion. But we'll get to that if we look at those games. But number two is almost the quintessential Donkey Kong Country game. It's I just almost wish and obviously it's not the case, and it's the same number three. I almost wish there was a way to play as Donkey Kong in number two after you beat it. But maybe we'll chat about that when we when we look at number two.
And I totally agree. Like that's ultimately, and the levels aren't designed around that, but yeah, that's one weird thing of the series. And I was actually really scratching my head trying to think of a movie that had the main characters who changed in a trilogy. Like to actually try to find the right analogy for it, because it is odd. Like I can't think of too many trilogies where there's not one single character, a protagonist that is consistent all the way through. Like you've got Donkey and Diddy as a protagonist, then you've got Diddy and Dixie, and then you've got Dixie and Kitty. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Like that's weird, right? Like that's weird.
yeah. The good thing about Kitty is that he kind of feels like Donkey Kong,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
also the fact like, the bouncing across water mechanic is so cool. That's something that anyway we'll let's save that discussion when we get there. But
Yeah.
it is interesting, but it's kind of good. I guess a good way to mix it up and provide a newer experience. It's not just rehashing the same from the previous game. So.
Mm. And I think given that you cannot play like so, you know, Donkey Kong Country is just in your Nintendo Switch Online subscription. Definitely play it. Like if you haven't played this game, you should have a crack at it. It's a great game. Like even 2020 standards for me, it still holds up.
Oh yeah, just mind some of the horrible hitboxes and questionable level decisions.
Yeah, no, true.
Cool.
Was there anything else you wanted to mention about Donkey Kong Country?
One last thing.
Mm?
So when you beat the game, Cranky talks to you and he says,
Yes.
check your banana hoard, you'll be in for a surprise. And I'm thinking, I've spent this whole game defeating enemies in giant banana hordes, reclaiming my bananas. In what way am I going to be surprised that I've got all the bananas back? I know I've got all bananas back. Why is it a surprise? It just didn't make sense to me. And I'm like, why? It's so stupid what he says.
Oh,
Anyway,
so I thought you were going to mention something else that was very, I guess, infamous in this game with Cranky.
okay, what is that?
Do you know about the Cranky Run?
Cranky Run. No, you can indulge me. Well, not indulge
Okay,
me,
so
sorry. Enlighten me.
there's a little thing, and it really actually made me go, oh, that's funny. That at the end of the game, Cranky is like rocking back and forth, and he said, I did this using one life in 60 minutes.
Ah, yeah, okay, I get it.
Like, did you see that line when you finished the game?
Yeah, so is that why you use the replay, the rewind to do it in
No.
one?
No, I don't even think I finished in 60 minutes with
No,
the rewind.
damn it. That would have been good.
So, yeah, like, there was a very infamous thing because, back then, remember when these games came out, and again, our friend Danny said that you could play as K. Rool. And I fully believe this.
He was
And
he was a he was a
he was a troll.
no, not troll, and I'm trying to think of the right word. He was like not jokester, but he was like the ultimate like trying to come up with schemes, like a schemer.
He was a schemer. So this stuff back in the day when you read this, you saw it in the game. It goes, Cranky's, I did this in one life in 60 minutes. So many people spend so long trying to do this. And it turns out, and this came through the completionist challenge, and he got in contact with Rare or like ex-members, and they actually did want to introduce like a special mode where you play as Cranky Kong if you beat the game in under 60 minutes with one life, but never got around to doing it. But they forgot to kind of remove that line, or it was just kind of like left in there.
Well, that line makes sense because it's just Cranky's just always talking about how much better he was and how much better the old games were. Because we didn't say before that Cranky is the original Donkey Kong. So
Yes, we haven't mentioned that. Yes.
yeah.
Can you explain the lineage of Donkey Kongs?
I'm not going to get into that. All I know is that I believe you can you play Cranky Kong in Tropical Freeze, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's cool that they finally actually because the future, like when you look at Donkey Kong 64, which was the next Donkey Kong game after Donkey Kong 3, you definitely couldn't play as like Funky Kong or Cranky Kong. So it's cool they kind of brought those classic characters back for the the retro studios games. So
Yeah, because he has a mechanic like Scrooge McDuck in DuckTales with a stick.
Awesome, but fantastic game. Yeah, give it a go. If you don't want to play the whole thing, just play through the first couple of worlds. I think it gives you a good taste of the game, and you'll get through some of the cool soundtrack as well. So,
Yeah, definitely.